Tonight in Q Weekly, we talk to Federal Labor MP Lindsay Tanner about his views on the proposed Gay Marriage Act amendments. And we meet the team behind the death of homophobia in the fabulous new anti-homophobia video resource, Homophobia Exposed.
Hi, I'm Michael King and welcome to Q Weekly. This week the gay marriage adoption bill has been in the papers everywhere, as has the little ABC episode where these are my two mums. So we're here to interview Lindsay Tanner, Shadow Minister for Communications and now also Shadow Minister for Community Relationships. Let's go and find out what Mr Tanner has to say about the whole issue. I'm joined by the Shadow Minister for Communications, Lindsay Tanner, and also recently a new portfolio as well, Community
Relationships, that's
Community
right.
Relationships, which actually means...
primarily focusing on non-material issues. We have a huge range of problems and social issues in our society that governments, I think, tend to neglect. So, for example, I'm currently working on the problems of loneliness and isolation of older people living alone. There's a whole range of those kind of issues that governments, I think, have failed to really get across, and so the focus of the portfolio is looking on the non-material aspects of human relationships and try to strengthen them and foster stronger, healthier relationships and better participation in our society.
Well, that's certainly in the news over the last few weeks, particularly the issue of the gay marriage bill. Although you've been outspoken yourself on this, as have other members of the Labor Party, but the Labor Party is not opposing the gay marriage bill as such, although you are opposing other parts of the bill, and thankfully this week it's gone to committee. Do you think, as the Prime Minister said this week, that the Labor Party is having two bob each way on the matter?
No, I don't. In fact, I put a point of view some months ago in a speech which has essentially been reflected in our position, which was to say, look, marriage is and always has been a heterosexual institution, and it's not that long ago that the dominant view in the progressive side of politics in Australia was that marriage was an oppressive, hierarchical, patriarchal institution. I don't necessarily agree with that, but the point I'm making here is that there are different ways of dealing with the substance of this issue, and the substance is about relationships. It's about the fact that there are thousands of people around Australia who are in long-term, loving, caring, same-sex relationships. And we don't have to turn the notion of marriage upside down to deal with that issue. The question is providing an appropriate, positive legal framework so that those people can have access to the same kinds of rights and duties as people in heterosexual marriages are able to do. That's the substance of the issue. I don't believe we need to get too hung up about the title, about the term marriage. I'm a supporter of the idea of some kind of civil union legislation or some kind of equivalent framework which focuses on the core issue, which is that the state and our society should be fostering loving, caring relationships. They're a good thing, and we shouldn't be putting obstacles in people's way of forming and maintaining those relationships.
Recently in America, of course, they've put forward to amend their own constitution. While most of their population would perhaps tacitly approve of that, they're not approving of an actual change in their constitution. Similarly, do you think that the government's misreading the Australian public in this respect, that they may actually agree with the government on this issue but don't want our legislation to be enacted to actually discriminate against one part of the community?
Look, I'm not sure what the overall community view of these things is. Really what's going on is John Howard's playing political games. He's trying to use the issue to shore up his support in certain sections of the community who are pretty overtly anti-gay and also create difficult issues for the Labor Party to deal with. So he's just playing politics with all this. It's quite transparent and there is no need to do what he's done, but equally, as far as we can see, the existing legal position is that marriage is a heterosexual institution, and so in a sense what you're doing with this legislation is simply reaffirming the existing legal position. Ultimately, I don't have a particular problem with that, but let's acknowledge what's going on, why it's being done. The real question here is a different question. That is, how can we as a society ensure that same-sex couples have got equivalent rights and obligations between themselves, issues like property and things like that, that they've got the ability to develop loving, caring, long-term relationships in the same way as heterosexual couples have got, and they've got access to the same kind of supportive legal mechanisms that are designed to encourage and entrench those kind of relationships. That's the issue. We haven't really progressed that a great deal over the last couple of weeks. However, the one really good thing I think is that John Howard has put these issues on the agenda. They weren't really on the major political agenda in Australia. They've been sort of floating around there in the ether. But by taking the step that he has taken, he really has put these issues on the agenda, and that's a good thing. Yeah, I don't think he intended to do that.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think he intended to do that. Is this his tamper, which I think he used effectively in the last election? Is he using this in this election, a similar kind of... I don't think it boded well for the Labor Party in the last election. What about this time round?
Look, I suspect he's had those kind of thoughts in his mind in pursuing these issues, although I think this time round it's more about trying to shore up his support in particular constituencies that are part of his natural power base. And I don't think this is the same kind of issue. I suspect he's got similar thoughts in his mind, but obviously there are big differences between his position and our position on these broader issues. One of the things that I think shouldn't be overlooked is that Labor is now committed explicitly to removing the variety of discriminations that exist against gays and lesbians, same-sex couples with respect to federal legislation in taxation, social security, superannuation and so forth. Now, that might seem like the sort of thing that should happen automatically, but believe me, it's not easy. I pursued, when we were in government as a backbencher, the issue of superannuation, because you've got superannuation legislation where dependency is defined around heterosexuality. And I made a little bit of progress, but not much, and then we lost office. But it was very clear at that point that people were pretty toey about it, to have got to the point now where we're formally committed to going through every piece of relevant legislation and removing these structural discriminations, I think is a pretty major step forward, and clearly well in advance of Howard's position. And the great thing is that he has implicitly acknowledged the justice in the superannuation issue, although his solution I don't think is a particularly good one. At least he's actually conceded the argument. Now, that means that the cause of eliminating discrimination and achieving justice has taken a significant step forward. And one of the things that I've been pointing out to people over the past few weeks is that I spoke in the debate in the federal parliament only 10 years ago to pass legislation that was designed to formally eliminate the final piece of law in Australia that criminalised homosexual acts. That was only 10 years ago. So the society and the community view and the political debate has come a very long way since that time, but we shouldn't expect to achieve the sort of perfect outcome overnight. There is still some distance to be travelled.
Over the last few days specifically, there's been a bit of an uproar, particularly from the government, I might add, and quite a bit on Talkback Radio, etc., about a recent ABC Play School, I think it was, episode where a child innocently referred to her two mums. It's been blown up a bit in the media this week. What are your thoughts about this whole issue?
My primary position as the Shadow Minister for Communications and the, hopefully, Minister for Communications within a few months is that the Minister, and by definition the Shadow Minister, shouldn't interfere in ABC programming decisions. It's a position I've taken consistently since I've been in the position. The ABC is supposed to be independent, so provided it's complying with its charter, with the law, it's the choice of ABC board and management as to what's broadcast. I think that principle is particularly important. I think what you're seeing is, again, this gradual process where more and more the recognition and awareness and understanding of that kind of family form will develop to a point where most people won't have a particular problem with very small children becoming aware of it. I can understand why now some people do. So I don't particularly condemn them for having that view. And I think it is important to keep in mind that for kids of that age, and I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so they're a bit beyond the sort of play school age, but parents of all shapes and sizes are pretty keen to, in effect, maintain as much control as they can over how those kids grow up and what they're exposed to over that time. So I think people expressing those concerns, it's understandable. But I think we need to also acknowledge that those kind of relationships and family structures are entirely legitimate, and that bit by bit, through things like civil union legislation, whatever, bit by bit we are in practice legitimising them in the community mind.
Lindsay Tanner, Shadow Minister for Communications.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I think we have to, well, if anything we've learnt from that interview is that the GLIBT community has to continue to act up. It's only through your emails, your letter, your phone calls that effectively we can make any change to the legislation, or in the committee stage that it now is. We have a big thank you, by the way, to put out to one of our volunteers, Glenn, who's made an amazing donation to Bent TV, which you too can do to help keep us on the air. Don't forget to send your mail to PO Box 6256, St Kilda Road Central, Melbourne 8008, and help keep Bent TV on the air. This is Michael King for Q Weekly.
Last week in Q Weekly, we had the pleasure of presenting to you Homophobia Exposed, a brand new video resource produced by the young members of Way Out, the Central Victorian gay youth group based in Kyneton, right in the heart of the Goldfields district. This week, we're back in Kyneton to talk in person to the cast and crew of Homophobia Exposed. And yeah, we're here with the guys from Way Out here in Kyneton on this very, very wintry autumn day. How are you going, guys?
Good, thanks.
And I've got, from over here, I've got Brenton, Martha, Drew, Sarah, and Project Officer Sue Hackney. Now, Way Out's a rural project for queer youth, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And how long's it been going for, guys?
We started the group.
Yeah.
About 2 years, yeah?
Yeah.
And basically, what are the aims of the group, and what have you hoped to achieve?
We're primarily an action group, and we've done all sorts of different stuff around the community.
Okay.
But through that, we've also become a bit of a sort of group. But we've done, what have we done? T-shirts, we've done merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
Merchandising, pins, lollies, badges,
Okay.
presentations at schools
Fantastic.
to promote homophobia.
Oh.
To promote it.
Hopefully to demote it.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, basically we've put together all this merchandise so that we can raise awareness, and that's the way that we've accessed it. So.
But basically it's all about getting the visibility out there, awareness of queers, yeah? Yeah?
Especially in the country regions where it's more important.
So had you guys been brave enough to make the coming out step before you'd heard of Way Out, or?
No, I came out at school in Kyneton, which was
A big deal.
big deal.
Yeah.
Like I was like out of school, 600 or something. I was the only gay student to come out, and I was about year 10, and I was known as the gay kid at school. But I did have a lot of support from friends and throughout Way Out when I joined up. But there was also a lot of immature kids who bag you every time they see you, of course. But it has been pretty good.
So it
And I have
wasn't
had
easy.
It wasn't easy, no, but I have had a lot of support from friends and family, and there are a couple of teachers who are really loving it.
I came out in front of the Year 12s and did a speech, but I talked about the group and said that I was doing, so it was kind of, the group when I did my speech, it was like homophobia exists and you can't deny it. We haven't said how hard it is for kids in the country. Like, ridiculous things happen. Like, Drew got beat up. I had to change schools. Like, the reality is that it's horrible for most kids. Like,
we hear about
Because
it,
it's
but
not accepted.
See, like,
we
it's all,
get desensitized.
In this city, well, you've got everything, you know, everything's there.
and if you don't
There's
have
so many
anything,
different types of
then you
people.
can go and find it. Like, there are lots of other support groups in Melbourne. But before we existed, there was nothing here. Like, if your parents aren't accepting of you and your school pretends that you don't even exist, then like, who can you talk to if you haven't got close friends? Then it's like the worst period of your life. Of course you want to get away. Of course you want to move away from here.
It's
So I
very,
think like the group is really powerful in that if you don't have anything else, and even if you're not a part of the group but you hear about it, it's like there is something there, and there are people that care, and it's okay for me to be gay. Like, if everyone in the community says that it's wrong and that it doesn't even exist, and there is a young kid, and
queer.
there's
You
a
don't get any verification at all.
then what?
You honestly do think you're the only one, don't you?
Especially
Always do.
coming up in a Catholic school, they do not even talk about it. And you think, you know, like people when you're first starting to have, you know, feelings for the same sex, it's quite confusing, of course.
But that's the reality of it. The teachers don't care.
Sue, you're the project officer of the group. You've been involved since day one.
Yes, and it's been I can say without any reservation, one of the most fantastic jobs that I've ever had, for a range of different reasons. Certainly the involvement of the young people and the work that they've done has taught me a lot about what skills and expertise young people have in raising awareness on quite sort of complex issues in our community, such as homophobia and you know, just a lack of awareness of sexual diversity. So it's been really exciting. There's been some challenges, certainly. I think, generally speaking, in rural areas, there's a lot more pressure on young people, particularly the young men, to conform to that sort of stereotype of being a macho male. So that makes it hard for any young man in our community that's inclined to say towards something other than football or, you know, cars or, you know, general redneck behaviour.
It's hard enough in the city, let alone out here, So the project's been government funded for the past couple of years, and that's coming up to... is there a possibility of renewal, or is it coming to an end?
It's difficult at this stage. It was funded as a pilot initiative, a suicide prevention pilot initiative by the Department of Human Services for 3 years. It was one of 2 funded in the state. However, the department's made it clear at this point that there's no further funding from the same area. So we're currently seeking to have discussions with ministers and senior bureaucrats to find what other lines of funding may be available. Because our project, you know, has been also externally evaluated by La Trobe University through the Australian Research Centre in Sex, Health and Society. And the evaluation results are coming up extremely positive, and without a doubt it's been a project that it's achieved a lot of successes and really hit the mark in a number of areas.
So yeah, the merchandising is a big part of what you've done, your t-shirts and posters and what have you, but you've also made a video which is fabulous, and you all performed and crewed on that,
Yes.
It was a learning curve, definitely.
We all wrote it and performed it, and then we were in Custom and we performed it live.
And what was that like?
Performance live?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting because we hadn't actually produced the film yet. So it was a shortened version, but it was just to basically shorten
It was
take.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's
Like,
great.
it was so good. People loved it.
Live reactions.
Yeah.
Buzz, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Everyone was
people-
just really happy for us. They were just like, wow, congratulations, I love what you're doing. This is really positive. And after that, there was a group started up. So it's
We've
really
sort of become
positive.
celebrities. Like, when we went to Mowbray School and did speeches to, like, we took 5 classes of Year 9s on a short course against homophobia, which was fantastic. But like, one little boy was like, "Are you guys gonna travel around Australia and like get famous doing this?" We were like, "Yeah." Yeah.
So you've actually taught Year 9s. You've talked to them about
Yeah.
homophobia. How was the general attitude? You know, poof does this and poof does that, or was it? you know.
Well, they've never had anything. I mean, these kids don't even, you know, like they don't even have adult support even, and they're with friendships, you know, just in there. It's just been really, it's hard for them.
That school has done a lot of other stuff as well. They've got another course going, like an anti-discrimination course. So they're quite far ahead in that respect. So other schools, we've been to other schools as well. Kyneton High. So that's doing it there was more of a new thing. So the kids weren't prepared. Like they were kind of a bit prepared for us, but they took a lot of the interest came from just us as individuals. Like they wanted to know about were we gay, and so that was how they learnt from us. That was kind of, they knew about homophobia. Yeah, that was a learning curve for them in the respect that they didn't know people that were gay, but they knew that it was wrong to be homophobic, you know what I mean? So it kind of showed that young queer kids do exist and that it's a reality, that it's hard for them.
When people don't get to talk about it or they don't come out, no one ever discusses homophobia.
Yeah.
They're not sure what it's about. So even if they're not just, you know, interested in, you know, homophobia in itself, they're just interested in seeing, they want to know what it's like. They like to hear about it's a different lifestyle.
We provided a forum where they could talk about it openly, and like one of the exercises was to throw out words that they would use for someone who's gay or lesbian or bisexual, and with the understanding that they can go nuts, they can say whatever they like, with the understanding that, look, when you're outside, this is what you're saying and this might actually affect someone. So what was great about it was we had to say to them, look, say what you like now, but outside this is the reality of it, this is what the impact is on other people.
Wow, very worthwhile. So the video, is it going out to schools now as sort of part of a regular homophobia kit or anything? Or
Soon.
Very
Not-
soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting it all organised and finalised.
So those scenarios that came out of it in the school playground and what have you in the film, are they all part of your own experiences? Or had
It's
you
sort
been...
of-
It's the stereotypical experience, I reckon.
But it's drawn from my personal experiences as well, like what we felt was most important that needed to be portrayed.
And more, what would make more of an impact?
Yeah.
And what would be in your face?
We wanted to look at areas that homophobia does impact on, so that's why we looked at the school, the family home. We sort of touched on religion a little bit, and within yourself, and just out in the street, just socially, just generally what's going on. So that's what we had to think about. We thought we had to think about what are the areas that homophobia is actually impacting on. So
It's a very vivid image, that sort of almost Grim Reaper type representation. It was fantastic.
Never again. I love my kid and will always be there for her.
You made me tease and reject my best friend. I've known him since I was little. You will never, ever do that to me again.
Well, homophobia, it seems you are nothing without your followers. You are nothing but ignorance and hatred in the people you fool. But if people stand up to you and are strong enough, that's when you will not succeed, and that's when you really will become nothing.
To get hold of a copy of Homophobia Exposed, call Sue at COBAW on 5421-1619 or email her on shackney@cobaw.vic.gov.au.